So, I've been finding myself in the position fairly a little more often recently, in which it would be helpful for a person to have just kind of a quick checklist of things to take a look at while they're moving with the longsword, and particularly the longsword, just by the nature of having both hands tied to the weapon. And I started thinking about a kind of a checklist, some kind of a list of things that you can run down when you're not quite sure what's going on with your body mechanics. And I think I've come up with something. I'm gonna make things obviously a lot more solidified. This is just me talking at the camera. The list goes step one: are your shoulder blades engaged or are your shoulders down and back? Two: are your hands in line with are your hands in line with your hips? Three: are your hips open? And four: are your wrists straight? So here for this one, I'm gonna just kind of talk through the first one a little bit, and I also think that this is a good order to present them in, and a good order to think about them in. Uh, Reasons for this. Well, first let's talk about what exactly I'm getting at with the shoulders, and that is if I stand up. And this is a little bit of a common problem, especially among people who don't who don't really know their bodies that well, or they're kind of just getting started. Maybe they just have bad habits because they do a job where they sit down. But this kind of rounding of the upper back translates into difficulties with stability in moving the sword, particularly engagement of the shoulder blades. Now, what this tends to look like is this sort of like scapular winging, which if you, I can like sort of get my thumb under my shoulder blade. It's the shoulder blade kind of sticks out a little bit, and this can happen with this will happen sometimes with just sort of external rotation at the shoulders. I'm sorry, internal rotation at the shoulders, trying to power the entire cut with the arms rather than with the entire body. Yes. All right, yeah, that's okay. Thinking through this. So where do people tend to go wrong? Um, One place where this tends to happen is that the shoulders will kind of come up when somebody's trying to make a cut. These are all exaggerated motions, of course. Um, and I think what happens there is trapezius kind of kicks in as a compensation method for some of these other muscles not being as strong. And the thing is, especially when I get that really dominant upper trap, this the shoulder blade sticks way out here, and that gives me problems. So when we talk about getting the shoulder blades down and back, we are talking about taking the this bit here, it's really gonna get my finger under there now. Taking this bit and sucking it into the rib cage and bringing it down. How do we do this? I like to dip into certain ideas that are presented in German sources. So I really like the string idea, or the kind of the string concept. The idea that you should feel as if there's a string pulling your tip into the target. I think that we can, and I like to use this with hips. When we're stepping with our cuts or with our thrusts or whatever, we imagine that there's a line tied to our hips, and that gets pulled. Our hips move with it. So I'll even present this by kind of grabbing a belt. We can do this with our shoulder blades as well. And the way to do this is, right, I've got my imaginary string, and what I'm going to do is, right, I've got this shoulder blade kind of popping out, and I'm just going to connect this string to the shoulder blade right there. And what I'm going to do there is pull on this, and that brings the shoulder blade in. What's really happening here is most of this is getting picked up by serratus anterior. That is that kind of sawtooth muscle you see on boxers all the time. It's really big on boxers, and what that does is it keeps the shoulder blade tight to the rib cage, so that the shoulder blade can still move around through this whole range of motion, but it's connected better to the rest of the body. So with that first consideration of are the shoulders down and back, where else does this help us? For starters, all right. See, I've got this kind of rounded. My thoracic spine is kind of rounded. If I connect my strings to the shoulder blade here, and pull that little corner forward, engage serratus anterior. Then it pulls the rest of my spine into a neutral state. Some ways that we can work on kind of visualizing this. If I get my hand out in front of me like so, and I start pulling it out here, moving from the shoulder, not from like the wrist, or even not even just pulling from the shoulder. Right. So that the SA engagement here, right, you can sort of see that line popping up. And on the other side, just to get this angle, right? Draw the shoulder blade in under the arm so that it's tight over here. And you can maintain that engagement while moving around. Now, where we see this with longsword is, again, not pulling the shoulders up like this. You see a whole lot of that, especially when this shoulder kind of pops up instead of the shoulders staying square. Right, see the difference there, in which as opposed to once again take that shoulder blade, bring it here. And I've gone from this to this. Another place where this helps us is at the end of a cut, or when we go through the full range of motion of an overhand cut. Without my scapula engaged, right? I'm gonna let this kind of loosen up and sort of lurch forward. There's a tendency to hit the ground, even for tension and kind of lose tension in the wrists. As well as having the hands kind of veer outside of my center line. And on this side, and you see from the back, again, you see the shoulder kind of popping up without appropriate engagement from in the scapula, drawing that in. So take a look at that. In doing this, did I? Broke through the chip when I did that, and whoops, I'll have to replace that. In doing this, I kind of lock out here. This is and I don't, arms don't need to be right out in front of me. They don't need to be totally extended. This is a comfortable place. This is a comfortable stopping point. This is where my arms just sort of want to end. And this is one of those things that is different for everybody's body. But you see that when I give a cut in this manner, hands are nice and centered. That's consideration for the next video. Everything kind of lines up just because the shoulders are set down and back. This keeps the shoulders square, keeps too much of like this from happening, which kind of fucks things up a little bit. If I start kind of angling my shoulders and getting all twisted up, again, this goes for the longsword. That sort of thing can change when I have one hand on the weapon, but as long as they're tied together, if that level starts changing, then shit gets weird. Let's see other places where that comes in handy. I mean, pretty aside from like everywhere. Absetzen. When I come across to Absetz, if this sort of pops up, then I lose all the stability that because I no longer have that connection between my shoulder blade and my rib cage. I lose the entire connection to my lats. This in turn loses the connection to my glutes through my legs all the way into the ground. So keeping that sort of kinetic chain between the sword and the ground is obviously important, and a place where that often gets interrupted or disrupted is in the shoulder blade. Not so much in the shoulder joint, although issues with the shoulder joint itself come directly from the position of the scapula. This is part of the reason I'm approaching things in this way is because everybody's built differently, and I believe that part of a person's training has to be getting to know your own body and figuring out what movement patterns work for you. I think that learning is that the technique sticks better when you do it that way, and you develop a better connection to the art itself when you kind of discover things in the art yourself, whether that's something you stumble across or are guided to. Okay, what can I do? Okay, so some ways to work on essay strength, because aside from keeping from doing things in practice, we would want to find ways to strengthen this muscle. And so some of those ways would be just the very top portion of a push-up. Once I'm here and locked out, if I continue sort of bringing my shoulder blade forward, then I start strengthening that motion. If I do this on this side, I can do this on like the workbench. So everything's locked out, and I let my shoulder blades sag, and then just this all remains in a straight line. The torso remains in a straight line. I'm keeping a little bit of a hollow body position here. One thing that is moving is my shoulder blade is moving back and forth, and so I'm strengthening the motion of getting that forward. Another thing that can be done is this shows up in the runner's 10 kind of prehab program for professional pitchers, and that's the SA press, or the serratus anterior press. This can be done just sitting on a table, in which I sit down and I just lift myself up a little bit, get to the edge of the table. This is useful if you can't really be off the edge of the table. In this case, right, I'm allowing the whole arm to come up because the shoulder blade is coming up. Remember that the entire arm is attached to the shoulder blade. That's it. There's a kind of a dish socket in the shoulder blade itself. We call it the glenohumeral joint, and then that is connected to the clavicle, and then the clavicle is connected to the sternum right here. So the only place where your arm actually connects to the rest of your skeleton is at this tiny little point over here. Otherwise, all of this is just kind of I think there are 18 muscles that connect to the scapula. So your shoulder is kind of really just a couple dozen muscles in a trench coat, and like not a real thing. Shoulders are wacky, but yeah. yes. So another way that you can do that is just off the edge of a table, kind of do these like sort of little dips. But that is again a thing that you should be feeling right in here. Other other ways to work on this. If I can take my sword and do kind of pull aparts and push ins. That's real real technical terms there. Uh, but I take my longsword in a supinated grip and I try to pull it apart as hard as I can. And again, should be feeling this right here. I should be pulling the shoulders down and back and keeping that tension. I bring this sword up as high as I can. You might need to set it out kind of high. I think that the supinated grip is a little bit easier for feeling that engagement. It can also be done with a pronated grip, although the thing there is that it's easy to kind of lose that engagement and start to cheat with the shoulder blades extending back. That doesn't really seem to happen with the supinated grip. That said, um, pushing in, yeah, what do you know? Yeah, that's also easier with the supinated grip. Again, that also you feel this right in here. So yeah, haven't talked at a camera for a minute about this. I think I'm starting to feel pretty good about this whole thing. We could talk about what scapular engagement is, why it's important, and ways to check that and ways to improve. I think that's all I'm gonna do for this one. I think I'm happy with this. Anyway, signing off. Cheers.